The world was stunned when the bodies of Hollywood legend Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were discovered in their Santa Fe home weeks after their deaths. The shocking twist? No one had known they were dead, and as police delved deeper into the investigation, they uncovered unsettling clues that suggested someone knew about their tragic fate before anyone else. As the investigation unfolded, all eyes turned to Hackman's daughter, Leslie, and was she involved in something far darker than anyone could have imagined? What was she concealing, and how far was she willing to go to keep the truth buried? The answers may be far more shocking than you could ever expect. There was an eerie silence that filled the home. The door was barely ajar, and outside, a pile of unopened mail had sat untouched for weeks. Something wasn't right. A concerned neighbor, sensing the oddity, called the authorities. The officers arrived, expecting a routine welfare check, but what they found was anything but ordinary. Inside, the scene was chilling. Gene Hackman's lifeless body was discovered near the kitchen, slumped in a manner that was perplexing. His sunglasses lay next to him, as though they had slipped from his hands without a struggle. Betsy Arakawa's body was found in the bathroom, surrounded by pills scattered across the counter. The sink had dried out, leaving a thin film of residue, yet there was no blood, no sign of a break-in, and no evidence of a fight. Strangely, while two healthy dogs ran around the house, one was found dead in its crate. But the most troubling detail? The bodies didn't appear to be fresh. The decomposition process had already begun, with the skin tightening over bone. It was evident that Gene and Betsy had been dead for weeks. The house was filled with stale air, untouched for so long it felt like time had stopped. But the most haunting question remained: how had they managed to remain undiscovered for so long? The breakthrough came when investigators examined Gene Hackman's pacemaker data. The device, which had tracked his heart's last beats, provided an eerie timestamp. His heart likely stopped on February 17th. That meant the house had been silent for at least 9 days before anyone had thought to check on them. But even more perplexing was the discovery that, despite Gene's apparent medical emergency, Betsy never called for help. Why didn't she reach out if she was still alive after he passed? The mystery deepened when investigators uncovered alarming findings. Gene's house had been under surveillance long before his death. Security cameras had captured unusual activity, and phone records indicated strange communication patterns. Even more troubling were the GPS tracking data and phone logs, which pointed directly to someone close to home: Gene's own daughter, Leslie Ann. The investigation shifted focus, and the evidence quickly turned its gaze toward her. Leslie and Hackman's statements began to unravel. She claimed that she had spoken with her father just weeks before his death, but phone records told a very different story. No calls, no texts, no communication of any kind. Investigators dug further into her financial activity and found something even more suspicious. Long before Gene's death was confirmed, Leslie Ann was already inquiring about his estate, questioning inheritance matters when the world still believed Gene was alive. But the biggest red flag was the alteration of documents related to Hackman's assets. Someone had accessed and changed critical legal papers regarding his fortune before the official time of death had even been established. This raised an uncomfortable question. Was Leslie Ann preparing for something she knew was going to happen? The more investigators uncovered, the more bizarre the situation became. There were contradictions in Leslie Ann's story, and when questioned further, she became defensive and evasive. Why couldn't she explain the missing phone records? And why had she made financial moves related to her father's estate before he had even been declared dead? Then, the real bombshell dropped. One of the last known activities related to Gene's estate had occurred on the exact same day his pacemaker recorded its final heartbeat, before anyone had publicly confirmed his death. And yet, someone was moving on his property and manipulating his financial assets in the background. The timeline was starting to look less like a series of unfortunate events and more like a carefully orchestrated plan. The more investigators pieced together the timeline, the more the evidence pointed to a chilling conclusion. Gene's death wasn't just a tragic accident. It may have been the result of a much larger, premeditated scheme. The signs of financial manipulation, document tampering, and the strange surveillance footage began to paint a clearer picture. Someone had been waiting for Gene to pass, possibly long before he actually did. When the autopsy and toxicology reports came back, they only deepened the mystery. Gene's body showed no signs of physical trauma, no broken bones, no defensive wounds. It appeared as though he had simply faded away. But the question still remained. Who was behind this, and what exactly did they want? Was it money? Power? Something even more sinister? As the investigation continued, the walls closed in on Leslie and her involvement in the financial dealings, her strange behavior during the investigation, and her evasiveness pointed to a deeper truth, one that could shatter everything people thought they knew about this family. What really happened in those final days? How far did Leslie and go to cover up the truth? The answers may be closer than anyone expected, and once revealed, they could change everything. Stay tuned, because this case is far from over. There were no visible signs that Gene Hackman had been attacked or that any kind of violent incident had taken place. The same could be said about Betsy Arakawa's body. There were no marks, no signs of a struggle, and no evidence suggesting foul play. At first, the investigators considered the possibility that the cause of death might have been carbon monoxide poisoning, but that theory was quickly dismissed. The authorities had thoroughly checked the air quality, gas lines, and every other potential source of a leak. But nothing unusual showed up. There were no signs indicating that the couple had been exposed to anything that could have killed them quietly or without warning. Once carbon monoxide poisoning was ruled out, the investigators faced a new, troubling question. If the deaths weren't caused by any external harm or environmental factors, then what exactly killed them? The next step was to dive into the toxicology reports. No traces of pills. No barbiturates. The investigators didn't find any signs of overdose. In fact, their systems appeared to be clean. Yet, as the investigation progressed, something strange was uncovered. It turned out that important medicines were missing from Gene Hackman's home. Gene had a history of heart problems, and he was on medication to manage his condition. But when the authorities combed through his house, those prescriptions were nowhere to be found. It wasn't as though the bottles had simply been misplaced. If Gene had run out of his medicine, there should have been a record of him obtaining more, but there was no evidence of that. And if he had stopped taking his medication, there should have been leftover pills. But again, nothing was found. It appeared as though the medication had been deliberately taken. This discovery led investigators to a chilling possibility. What if Gene Hackman's death wasn't due to some external factor, but instead was a result of something far more insidious? What if someone had intentionally made sure he never received the medical care he needed? An act of negligence, or perhaps something more deliberate, such as intentionally withholding his medication, could have led to his condition worsening, and ultimately to his death. There was no sign of a violent confrontation, no shock to the system. Instead, it seemed like a slow, unavoidable decline. The investigation then turned to Betsy Arakawa's medications. Why hadn't she taken them if she had been experiencing a medical emergency? Why hadn't she called for help? Was she too weak to do anything? Or was there something or someone preventing her from doing so? The missing medications raised the stakes significantly. It seemed clear now that something was deliberately taken from the house, not simply misplaced or forgotten. This indicated intentionality, a calculated move, not a tragic accident. Suddenly, the police weren't just investigating two tragic deaths. They were looking into a potential plot, a meticulously thought-out plan. And this plan appeared to have been orchestrated by someone who stood to gain everything. The estate battle and legal drama began almost immediately. Gene Hackman's wealth, accumulated over decades of success in Hollywood, was now at the center of a fierce legal battle. Before Hackman's death was even officially confirmed, investigators noticed suspicious activity involving his assets. But the real shock came when they examined his will. There were missing pages, and crucial information had been altered. It was clear that someone had been tampering with the documents well before Hackman's death had been publicly acknowledged. Leslie and Hackman, Gene's daughter, appeared to be at the center of these changes. She had long been interested in her father's fortune, and her lawyers eventually admitted that she had attempted to make changes to the estate documents. The only problem? She wasn't allowed to. Yet, transactions and paper trails revealed that someone had been preparing for a transfer of wealth well before Gene Hackman's death was even confirmed. The investigation pieced it all together. The will had been altered and then sent to a lawyer for review, while Hackman was still missing. It seemed clear that Leslie was involved. The question now was whether she was simply being opportunistic or if she knew something everyone else did not. Legal experts were divided. Some speculated that the changes had been made to secure a bigger inheritance, while others suspected full-blown fraud. If Leslie had been preparing for her father's death, what else had she been preparing for? As the estate dispute grew more contentious, the missing pages from the will, the mysterious financial activities, and the mounting claims over the inheritance began to paint a disturbing picture. Prosecutors were building a case based not just on estate rights, but on deceit, greed, and the lengths someone might go to in order to secure wealth. As the case reached court, Leslie Hackman was about to face a decision she never anticipated. The real story was beginning to unfold, and it all pointed to Leslie Hackman. Her involvement in the estate battle raised serious questions, and the police were determined to uncover the truth. They began to monitor her every move, keeping a close eye on her actions 24 hours a day. Every phone call, every email, and every financial transaction was scrutinized. What they discovered was disturbing. Her bank records told a story she hadn't shared with anyone. There were alerts for unusual transactions, with cash being moved between different accounts in small, hard-to-track amounts. These transfers took place at odd times, often before Gene Hackman's death was even publicly confirmed. Private emails, retrieved by investigators, revealed that Leslie had been discussing the estate long before the public was aware of any legal complications. Her phone records also raised red flags. The timeline showed that she had been in contact with financial experts, moving assets, and attempting to push legal proceedings forward, all while Gene Hackman was still thought to be alive. It was clear that she had been preparing for something, and the money trail was even more damning. A forensic audit revealed that large sums of money had been quietly moved into private accounts, including offshore ones that were difficult to trace. Leslie had been moving money well before she was legally entitled to it. At this point, it was no longer just a theory. The evidence, from surveillance footage to financial records to legal investigations, pointed directly to Leslie and what seemed like a tragic, emotionally driven response to her father's death turned out to be a calculated and elaborate plan to seize his wealth. The sentencing followed swiftly, with overwhelming proof linking her to bank records, tampered documents, and financial maneuvering. Leslie Hackman was arrested and charged. The case moved through the court system quickly, like a tightly assembled puzzle. Each piece revealed how she had attempted to manipulate the system in her favor. The missing pages from the will, the early land claims, the hidden bank transactions, all pointed to one thing: a deliberate plan. Leslie Ann's attempt to secure her father's fortune had backfired spectacularly. She lost all rights to his estate and was convicted of theft, financial manipulation, and obstruction of justice. Every asset and dollar tied to Gene Hackman was taken from her. Her name was removed from the inheritance permanently. She had gambled everything on a plan that fell apart, leaving her with nothing. But even after the sentencing, lingering questions remained. What really happened in Gene Hackman's final days? Did Leslie simply take advantage of a tragic situation, or was there something more sinister at play? While the case had concluded, the full truth may never be known. What do you think really happened? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates. Check out the next video on your screen now.